If you've ever shopped at Harbor Freight, you'll definitely understand this feeling. You walk in intending to buy one thing, and you walk out with 5 things because you think, oh well, it's only a few dollars. But then, a few weeks later, you're standing in the garage looking at that tool and exclaiming, "Hayes, I should have thought this through more carefully." The problem isn't that Harbor Freight sells bad tools. The problem is that some items there only suit certain types of users. And if you're not in that group, the initial savings will quickly turn into long-term frustration. More importantly, Harbor Freight employees are well aware of this and avoid certain products. This video will take you behind the scenes at Harbor Freight. 15 products that employees say straight up, "If it were my money, I wouldn't buy them," no matter how deep the discount. Have you ever bought any of these items? Watch until the end before you're the next one to regret it. I understand why everyone buys those cheap rolls of tape at Harbor Freight. You walk up to the checkout counter and see a whole roll of electrical tape or painter's tape for just a few dollars, so you just throw it in your basket. It's just tape. What's so special about it? You can buy it anywhere. I used to think that too. Many times. The problem is, tape is never something you use when you're in a good mood. You only touch it when the work is almost done. Your hands are covered in dust, and all you want is to finish quickly. And right then, the Harbor Freight tape started acting up. The paste doesn't stick. Pulling is tearing. If it sticks, the edges will peel off in a few days. Taking it off leaves sticky, gooey adhesive like chewing gum under the table. I used to use painter's tape to paint the edges, but when I peeled it off, half the wall looked like someone had smeared something across it. Saving $2 to $3 in exchange for 20 minutes of scraping glue and muttering curses in the garage? To be fair, cheap tape still has its uses. Marking wires, temporarily tying something, or using it once and then discarding it is fine. But if it's a project that needs to be neat, will be stuck for a long time, or something you don't want to look back on in a messy state, then don't. After making a few mistakes, I now tell my friends directly. Add another $3. Your mood is worth more than that. Clearly, cheap consumables won't make you poorer, but they'll ruin the experience faster than any other tool. If you've ever been to Harbor Freight, you've probably seen this scene: AA and AAA batteries stacked in piles, sometimes deeply discounted, sometimes included for free. And a very logical thought will immediately pop into your head. It's batteries. Just get a few to have on hand. Me too. Who wouldn't take it? But the problem with these cheap batteries isn't that they don't work. The problem is that it runs out annoyingly quickly. You put in new batteries, use them a few times, and then suddenly, they die. Without prior notice. Not weakening. It's like when you're running smoothly and someone pulls the plug. The worst is when you use it for things more important than toys. For example, flashlights in the garage, electronic measuring tapes, remote controls, or small battery-powered tools. I was once standing under a car, holding a Harbor Freight battery-powered flashlight, and at the exact moment I needed to see the clearest, it went completely dark. Not dangerous, but enough to make you swear a little to vent your frustration. Of course, cheap batteries still have their uses. Children's toys, okay, some snacks to nibble on for fun, no problem. Kids play with something for a few days and then forget about it, and no one cares if the battery is low. But if it's something you want to work when you need it, then don't. I saved a few dollars on batteries, but in return, I always feel like this is the right time. Then it's really not worth it. Oh, let me be clear. High-end Thunderbolt is a different story. Here I'm only talking about the cheapest batteries, sold just for fun, just to fill the shelves. Batteries are small things, but running out of battery at the wrong time will make you more frustrated than a broken tool. Perhaps I understand why the Warrior drill bits are so popular. You're at Harbor Freight. You see a combo set of several dozen drill bits, all sizes, and the price is so low it's a no-brainer. It's a drill bit. If it breaks, just replace it with another one. That sounds very reasonable, until you actually start using it. The problem with the Warrior drill bits isn't that they always break, but that they break right when you're halfway through drilling. Drilling was going well, just as it hit the material. Then snap, the drill bit broke, and the tip got stuck in the hole. So, instead of continuing to drill, you spend 15 minutes fumbling to pick out the broken piece, muttering to yourself as you go, "I should have known better." Drilling softwood, pallet wood, and doing some light work in the garage. Honestly, it's still usable. I'm not saying it's useless, but as soon as you touch a slightly harder metal, or you lean on it a little to go faster, these tips start to blunt, slip, and then break. It's not a major danger, but it's extremely disruptive to work. The most annoying thing isn't losing the drill bit. Losing a few dollars won't make anyone cry. Being uncomfortable is a waste of time and kills the mood. You were gaining momentum, only to be interrupted by something that shouldn't have broken so quickly. There's a very simple piece of advice that professional carpenters share. If you just need to drill wood and use it temporarily, it's okay. And if you need to drill metal and work seriously, it's best to skip it. Buying fewer needles is better, but if you use them for the right things, you'll be much less frustrated. Oh, if these kinds of shares help you avoid a few minutes of frustration in the garage, then subscribing to the channel is the easiest way to show your support. No spamming, just sharing a few things I wish I had known sooner. And speaking of wasting time on cheap goods, in the next section, we'll talk about something that disrupts the work rhythm even faster than a broken drill bit. If there's one item at Harbor Freight that I always hesitate to put in my cart, it's those cheap packs of cut-off wheels. It looks so tempting, a bag of a dozen, and the price is so low you think, oh well, if they wear out, I'll just replace them. I used to think that too, until they start cutting for real. The first problem is lifespan. These discs wear out so quickly that you feel like you haven't even gotten used to them before they've shrunk to the size of a coin. After cutting a few lines, you have to change it. It's not because you cut it wrong, it's just the way it is. And every time you change, you lose your rhythm, your enthusiasm, and your time. The second and more important issue is the feeling of insecurity. I'm not saying that all of them will explode or break, but when you hold the grinder, hear the disc spinning, and your mind is constantly wondering how long this will last, it's clear you're saving in the wrong places. A dish spinning right in front of you, sparks flying every place, but the quality is hit or miss. Just hearing about it makes it sound not worth it. But to be honest, the work is rough. Cut quickly. Cut just to get it done. No need for beauty. These plates are still usable. Cut the old iron bar. Cut the rusty bolts. Cut things you don't care too much about accuracy. Okay, but if you need clean, even cuts, and serious work, the very practical advice is, don't skimp on something that spins tens of thousands of times a minute right in front of you. In the next section, we'll talk about something even more insidious, something that doesn't immediately shock you, but is enough to derail the entire project without you realizing it until it's too late. There's one thing professionals never want to leave to chance, and that's measuring tools. But ironically, this is a tool that many amateurs often conveniently pick up at Harbor Freight. A speed square costs a few dollars. The digital caliper looks decent, and if it feels heavy in your hand, you figure it's probably good. I used to think that too. The problem is that the faulty measurement wasn't announced beforehand. It doesn't squeak, it doesn't break, and it doesn't startle you. It just measured a little wrong. And that little bit, you don't even realize you're doing while you're doing it. You only realize it when you put the two pieces together and they don't fit. It will be too late by then. To be fair, these items aren't always useless. Using it as a secondary ruler, for quick marking, or for temporary checks is still fine. But if it's a job that requires precision, where a single wrong cut leads to a whole series of things that need to be fixed, then don't. You might not see the measurement results right away, but you'll definitely see it once you've invested time, materials, and effort. And speaking of things that look small but have big consequences, in the next section, we'll talk about another item that's often underestimated until it strips the threads and makes you want to throw your entire toolbox out the window. At Harbor Freight, there's one item I find dangerously underrated: the cheap Allen or hex key sets at Harbor Freight. Compact, stackable, and the price is ridiculously cheap. You look at it and think, it's just an L-shaped iron rod. What's there to break? I used to think the exact same thing. But, the The metal in these sets is softer than you think. When I first used it, it was fine, but just tighten a little too hard, or encounter a slightly stiff screw, and you'll start to feel that very familiar sensation. The Allen wrench turning inside the screw without the screw turning. And that's it. Your mind is blank, and you're just standing there watching it with a less than friendly look. I myself have also experienced this when assembling a fairly simple item. What should have taken only 5 minutes ended up taking almost half an hour, because I had to figure out how to deal with the rounded-off screw. That's when you'll truly see the real cost of cheap Allen wrenches isn't money, but time and frustration. Even so, for light tasks, tightening a few unimportant screws, or temporary use, it's still okay. Assembling IKEA furniture, adjusting items that don't bear much weight, no problem. But if it's an important screw, a difficult screw, or something you don't want to damage, then don't. Oh, let me be clear. Icon is a different story. Here I'm only talking about the cheapest sets, just to have a complete set of tools. If you find these kinds of experiences helpful in avoiding some self-inflicted difficulties, then subscribing to the channel is enough. It doesn't need to be anything profound, just sharing a few things I've paid the price for on your behalf. And speaking of hand tools that you shouldn't slip with at the wrong time, in the next section, we'll talk about something that's even more likely to make you lose your patience: cheap ratchets. I have to be very careful in this section, as it's the most controversial part. Not all Pittsburgh ratchets are bad, but the problem with the low-end line is it's highly variable. Some things last for a few years without any problems, while others start to slip, stick, or become less smooth after only a short time. The most uncomfortable feeling isn't that it broke. If it breaks, it's clear. The annoying thing is that as you tighten it, it slips a tooth, making a very light clunking sound, but enough to make you pause and think, did that just slip? And from that moment on, you no longer trusted the ratchet in your hand. Used for fixing cars on weekends, doing some odd jobs in the garage, and sometimes you might never encounter any problems. But if it's for frequent use, tight squeezing, holding it every day, then the low Pittsburgh line isn't something I'd want to put my long-term trust in. It's suitable as a spare, to keep in the trunk, or for unimportant tasks. But I need to remind you, Pittsburgh Pro is a different story. The Icon is even more different. Here I'm only talking about the lowest tier, which many people buy because it's cheap and because it completes the set. And before someone comments, let me just say this: if your ratchet lasts 20 years without breaking, congratulations! That's a win, not an argument. In the next section, we'll talk about something even lighter, but it disappears so quickly that you'll wonder if you're burning money every minute. Sandpaper is something that's very easily overlooked. You're standing at Harbor Freight, seeing a whole stack of cheap sandpaper, enough grit, enough sizes, and you immediately think, it's sandpaper. If it wears out, just replace it. That sounds very reasonable. I used to think that too, until I had to take too many breaths. The problem with cheap sandpaper isn't that it's not abrasive, but that it loses its abrasiveness extremely quickly. You'd just made a few strokes, gaining momentum, when the paper surface started to become as smooth as newsprint. It looks like it's still a whole sheet, but in reality, it's lost its effectiveness. So you peel off another sheet, then another sheet. Before it even had a chance to warm up, you used up half a ream. But I'm not saying this to criticize. Cheap sandpaper still has its place. Stripping old paint, roughing it up, and sanding it lightly before further processing, that's perfectly fine. For things where you don't care about the final smoothness, and you throw them away after using them. It's not a problem, but if it's finishing, sanding the surface before painting, staining, or making something for others to see, the very practical advice is, don't skimp on what determines whether it looks good at first glance. And speaking of cheap items that look like the real thing but don't perform at all, in the next section, we'll talk about an item that many people buy because it looks familiar until it breaks right in their hands. If you've ever used high-quality Irwin clamps, you'll understand why those cheap plastic clamps at Harbor Freight are so tempting to buy. The shape is almost identical. The click of the trigger is pleasing to the ear, and it feels light in the hand, so I thought it would be convenient. I've bought a few of them too, with the simple thought, they're just clips, They'll hold things temporarily, and it's true, you can keep it temporarily. The problem is that many people, including myself, used to expect more than just okay. When you're doing a glue-up, gluing wood, and pressing the two sides together to make them fit, these clamps really start to show their true nature. It felt tight when I squeezed it, but when I turned my back to get something and turned back around, it had come loose without me even realizing it. It's not completely open, but it's off enough that the seam looks very unsightly. My friend used to stick a small piece of wood, thinking, "Oh well, plastic clips will do." The result is that the seam is slightly off, not enough to ruin it, but enough for you to look at it and see that it's not right. And that feeling is so uncomfortable because you know you did everything right, except for trusting the clip. So, let's get this straight from the start. If you just need to temporarily hold something to prevent it from spilling, act as a third hand when you need quick assembly, or for tasks that don't require a lot of clamping force, that's perfectly fine. I still keep a few for that kind of use. But if it's a precision glue-up, the kind where you want even tight clamping and don't want to go back and fix anything, the very practical advice is, don't trust a clamp you don't dare take your eyes off. In the next section, we'll talk about a product group that many people buy for convenience, but often end up buying more expensively elsewhere without realizing it. There's a very light trap, but a lot of people, including myself, have fallen for it at Harbor Freight. It's a psychological thing. Everything is cheap here. So when you're standing in a store and see a can of WD-40 or a bottle of Meguiar's on the shelf, your natural reaction is to just throw it in your basket without even looking at the price. Why? Because my brain is already used to saving here. The problem is that these name brand items aren't sold cheaper than the market by Harbor Freight. Sometimes it's even the same price or slightly more than Walmart, Home Depot, or Amazon. But since you're buying a bunch of other cheap things along with it, that price just slips by without making it feel expensive. I once bought a can of WD-40 at HF just for convenience. I got home and checked the prices again, and realized I paid a few dollars more than I would have elsewhere. It's not enough to break the bank, but it's enough to make you think, am I buying smart or am I buying out of habit? To be fair, buying for convenience is not wrong. You're in the middle of something, missing just one item, and don't want to run to another store. Just buy it, get it done, and it's reasonable. But if you're buying to hoard or find yourself reflexively adding things to your cart, you should pause for a second. Very practical advice. When buying from major brands, don't let the Harbor Freight logo make you forget to compare prices. In the next section, we'll talk about something even more invisible, something that sounds reassuring, but often only ends up costing you more money without solving anything. If you've ever stood at a Harbor Freight checkout counter, you're probably familiar with this phrase, "Would you like to purchase an extended warranty?" And when the item you're holding costs somewhere between $0 and $0, the natural reaction is to hesitate. Adding a few extra dollars for peace of mind is fine too. I've nodded my head quite a few times too. But think about it. With cheap goods, is that warranty package really worth the money? If a 5-item breaks after a while, the quickest and least troublesome solution is often to set it aside and buy another one. The time spent running around, exchanging items, and remembering expiration dates, sometimes it's even more tiring than the value of the item itself. I once bought a warranty for a small tool that I didn't use very often. When it breaks, I have to dig through papers, check if it's still valid, and then ask myself, am I saving money or making things difficult for myself? In the end, I still bought a new one to get things done. So, for more expensive, bulky items, or those that cause downtime and cost you money, such as airless sprayers or large equipment, a warranty might be worth considering. But for small, inexpensive items that are not used continuously, the answer is usually no. Here's some very practical advice for you. The warranty should be commensurate with the value of the item and the cost of waiting. If these real-life shares help you avoid a few slightly unnecessary purchases, subscribing to the channel is enough. I'm not selling courses, just sharing things I've bought and regretted so you don't have to repeat them. And speaking of cheap items that affect safety, in the next section, we'll be discussing an item that I always advise people. Don't skimp on too much. I know why the cheapest floor jacks at Harbor Freight sell so well. Looks big, looks solid, clearly states 2 to 3 tons, and the price is $10 cheaper than other places. You stand there and think very logically. I'm just lifting the car a little. What's the big deal? I used to think that too. The problem with these low-current jacks isn't that they crash with a bang. Usually not. The problem is the feeling of instability that you realize very quickly after a few uses. It can be pumped up, but the car won't be stable. It rose a little and then slowly deflated a bit. Not much, but enough to make you glance back a few times. And once the question, "Oh, is it going to drop again?" pops into your head, then it's considered done. If you use very little, lift quickly, and place jack stands fully, these jacks can still do the job. I'm not saying it's useless, but if you plan to use it frequently, or want something you don't have to think about every time you crawl under the car, this isn't the place to save money. In the next section, we'll talk about another item that's also compact and convenient, but causes a lot of people to lose patience because it's much weaker than they expected. The small, inexpensive air compressors at Harbor Freight are the kind of item you can easily buy. Compact, doesn't take up space in the garage, and the price is so low you can tell it's just for show. I used to think that too, until I started using it for more than pumping up tires. The biggest problem with these machines isn't that they don't run, but that they run very slowly and often leak. You turn it on and wait for the pump to fill the tank. It worked for a short while, the pressure dropped, and the machine started running again. And so, your work is divided into small segments. Do a little, stand and wait. Do some more, wait again. You wouldn't be human if you didn't get angry. I once tried using one to blow dust and shoot a few small nails. Before I could get used to it, the machine gave out. The pressure gradually eased, and the engine roared as if trying its hardest to prove I was still okay. It felt a lot like a pickup truck being towed by a large trailer. Nothing wrong, just wrong expectations. If it's just for simply inflating tires, light dusting, and occasional use, these machines can still handle it. If your only goal is to top off the tires every few weeks, then it's not a big deal. But if you think you'll be using it for anything continuously, or want to work without constant interruptions, the very practical advice is, a weak air compressor won't put you in danger, but it will make you lose your patience incredibly quickly. And speaking of things that look small but heat up very quickly when overworked, in the next section, we'll talk about another familiar item, the cheap grinder, which can surprise you after just a few minutes of use. I'm saying this again for clarity, so no one misunderstands. This video is not meant to bash Harbor Freight, and it's even less meant to say that buying these items was a mistake. A lot of things there are perfectly fine, even great value for money if used correctly and at the right frequency. This list is simply items that I and many others have bought with slightly high expectations, only to realize after a few uses that, oh, I shouldn't have skimped on this. If you've ever used one of these items and found it perfectly fine, please leave a comment. I'm telling you the truth. Each garage, each usage, each person is different, and it's precisely these shared experiences that make this content more credible, rather than whoever speaks louder being more correct. And if these experiences help you avoid a few slightly unnecessary purchases, subscribing to the channel is the simplest way to show your support. I'm not selling courses. I'm not accepting disguised sponsorships. I'm just sharing some very everyday things that I wish I had known sooner. This is a personal experience, not technical advice, and does not represent the entire product or brand. How to use the tool. What to buy. Ultimately, it's still your decision. I'm just helping you gain more perspective before you swipe your card. See you in the next video, in the garage.